Welcome everyone to another Azure Centric Podcast. In this case, we have a new format. We're going to talk about Azure news weekly, so then you can keep up with everything that is new on the Azure world, and associating that not only from not reading, but talking, having an informal conversation about what is new on Azure, but also to just leverage that to the business side of it, and what is not saying directly on the release of all Azure news that we are talking about right now. So with me, I only have my partner in crime, Andrew. How are you, Andrew?
I am fantastic, Marcos. Thank you for having me today.
That's
And
okay.
yeah, I'm really excited about talking about some of the news items that Azure releases. Doing it on a weekly basis. Some weeks we may have two or three items, and other weeks we might have to have two episodes.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for sure. Depending on how fast they are releasing these, right? But I think for now we have a pretty good. We are not going to talk about all the news. We are based basically on the Azure blog. So everyone that is following us on YouTube, we are doing on Azure blog, that is azure.microsoft.com, and then if you look for the blog, you will have all the news. Let's start with the first one. So let me switch these to the first one, and by the first one is talking about costs. So there is update on the Azure cost management, um, right?
yeah, so cost management is one of the things. Of course, we poke fun a little bit at ourselves, but I do tend to monitor budgets pretty closely. And one of the things that's important for businesses as well is looking at not just controlling costs, but how you can optimize costs. So, uh, you know, uh, cost management was a really exciting thing for me to see in the news. So here we're talking about kind of bringing in the same ideas as secure scores. So we have secure score, we have compliance score, and now we're starting to talk about cost management and applying a ranking to that. So a lot of the optimizations through here that they've added with this update are really kind of AI driven, and it's really cool. So they've started measuring things against um, different, different standards, other tenants. Of course, everything's anonymized, but you can also take a look at how to automate deployments now. So kind of as it works through, it's starting to build ARM templates for a full subscription that you can push out. It's then you can start kind of diving into that automation world. So the automation world can be a little bit daunting, but what a great way to dive in. So you can take a subset of different infrastructures and services, IaaS, SaaS, and PaaS pieces you have, and then push them into a different subscription even. It also includes reserved instances now. That was a big one I was really happy to read. So for a long time, reserved instances has not been included in your cost analysis, the cost management. And that's actually really big news because now it helps you to get a more full picture of what's in the tenant and what's on your bill. So I think the other thing I wanted to speak to just briefly on that one was Azure invoicing. As accurate as the invoices are, businesses have to do kind of the line by line validation. And as you know, Marcos, oh
Oh
my
my!
gosh.
Don't tell me about that.
So I'm just going to say Azure invoices are well known for their complexity.
Really? I didn't
So,
figure out that because
right?
usually I always have a call, and it's like between the day five, that usually when they arrive, when they look at say why I'm being charged on this. Say, remember, you have a VPN, so or you have this, you have that. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember that. That was related to that deployment that we did. Yes, exactly. So
Exactly, right? So part of the update with this is it helps to view those line by line broken out detailed charges that are tough to read in a PDF file, but now in the graphical interface using kind of the current scope views, you can really see a more human way. It's much more readable and understandable, and you can see what services things are members of. And of course, that can also help you identify any waste.
yeah,
Perhaps, like you mentioned a VPN, maybe you've had, a different service put in and you can drop that VPN now. So you can kind of catch things that way that might have been overlooked in other areas. So I think for me, the cost management update represents a really huge improvement. Quite often we get excited, and I admit I'm guilty too. I get really excited about the technology, and it's really cool. But how we're using Azure AI and automation to drive things like cost analysis and cost management, this is real world application of the actual Azure technologies
yeah.
that the whole structure is built upon, the very base fabric. So for me, this is actually a really cool update that has a lot under the hood that we don't really see.
Yeah, one of the things that I like about this update is that now it's based on a new service called the Azure Advisor Score,
Mm.
and using that to just going back like 20 days, for example, when they optimized, for example, on October 7, when Saket Gupta announced that it's been optimized for the Azure workloads, and I think is a good segue. It's not a new because already have 20 days more than a week, and the idea of this podcast is to just talk about what is new weekly. So we are out of scope a little bit, but it's a good segue. That is one of the recent news is the optimizing the Azure Advisor Score. This is probably something that we can demonstrate on another podcast, on another video, the deep analyzing of Azure Advisor, because I found that a lot of times there is a lot of things on Azure, and Azure Advisor gives us, besides the score that you mentioned, right, on security and all of different areas, it gives us one of them. They have, if I'm not mistaken, 4 subsystems over here. But one of them is cost, the other one is security, and the other one is the deployment that you are doing and everything else. So Azure Advice Score is being reviewed for the workloads. So now you became way more agile regarding the Azure DevOps and all of that. So it's a kind of a segue that we are starting to see that they updated first the advisor score. That's the funny thing over here. So on October 7, and now on October 27, they update the cost management. So
Yeah, you're
basically
right.
20 days, 20 days.
Yeah, and you were speaking to kind of the pillars of Azure design, which we should mention. We refer to that as the well-architected framework, right?
Yeah.
So Azure, Microsoft, and Azure have released, these pillars that we measure not only the way we work, the way we design, but also the way we analyze, right? So now that the advisor score weighs in the standards from the pillars in the well-architected framework. So as everything adapts, so does the algorithm to base our score. And of course, it keeps up with all of the changes throughout the full ecosystem, including architecture and design, which is really important because sometimes those standards change. I remember not maybe 4 or 5 years ago, only really secure organizations would look at multi-factor authentication. And now it's just part of the base. It's actually part of the defaults that come out. I was talking with someone else last night about MFA actually, and we were talking about how it's part of the base configuration now for Microsoft 365 products and Azure Active Directory. So turning on the security defaults is just done as a default now. instead of us having to switch it from no to yes. So yeah, things change, and it's important that we measure our tenants and our subscriptions against those standards so that we can understand not only where to save money with cost analysis, but also we can help identify any possible risk footprints that are getting larger because we haven't done anything to adapt.
Exactly.
So, yeah, no, I've said my piece. I feel a bit better about that.
That's okay. That's okay. That's the idea is to have an open conversation. This is not being scripted at all, as you can see it. As usually, this is a very open conversation, and that's good. So let's go to the second one. That it's not a new, it's not news, but it is something that I always passionate about. That is IoT. And it's the way that you can see the future. This is a geek. It's not a news. It's basically a reinforce that Microsoft announced regarding their smart building ecosystem that basically says that they are ready, or there are lots of partners that they are working. And if you go through this article, you see that there is a lot of innovation done not only by Microsoft, but kind of reinforcing everything that Microsoft is basically putting out on the market, and now we're starting to see a lot of things. So one of the things that I was at Ignite at that time, and I think it was with you as well when you were at Ignite a couple of years ago, that they announced the Azure Digital Twins. I always passionate about it. I have a lot of conversations with my good friend Georgie, but we never saw that possible. But now with this one, we're starting to see, and the good thing is, this new situation of the world with COVID-19 allow us to just drive even more the technology. So if you're going through the blog post, in this case, about this new of October 26, you're starting to see that they are the Azure maps that you can basically, a digital twin is you have your blueprints of your building, and now you are moving away from that building to a digital one. And now you can start to plug where you have IoT devices, like measure temperature, humidity, whatever it is, to that building, and now you have what's called a digital blueprint. Okay, and there is one video over here that I will not pass because it's basically 2 minutes that talks about the company based in New York that RXwell, I apologize, that talks about how they incorporate these smart buildings now that started to see. We cannot touch things, right? That is the new world. We cannot touch. We have to use mask. We have to use everything. So, and a lot of stores and a lot of new adaptation of this new world is you have to be more patient. That's the first thing, because you have to form a line 6 feet apart or 2 meters apart from the person in front of you and behind you as well, right? And then you have to go, for example, on any store, and they take you either your temperature. That is one of the things, right? But usually you cannot touch anything. So I remember that other day I was at the Apple store just to see the new iPhone, right? And or the new devices. And every time you touch, they come someone cleaning up everything. So on the smart buildings, imagine now that we are returning to more our previous way to work on office and everything else, there is a lot of touching things, right? So those biometric things that you used to have with the fingerprints, now it's not a good thing because that could be a point of contamination. And what they are doing is leveraging all of these solutions that you have available on IoT to just become more friendly. So I highly recommend going to see this post. This is more a geek post. It's not new. It's not everything new. What's new, it's what they are doing. It probably gives you some ideas what they are doing with that. And it's pretty cool because now you have those contactless enter. So basically, and you have the cameras that sees you and it knows you and can identify you, even for security measures, right? And it's really, really cool, and I highly recommend. I know that's a little bit outside of our wheelhouse, but it's still Azure and it's still a geek news, and it's always always interesting to see over here.
Yeah, so there's a couple things about this that actually get me really excited as well. So first, I want to say, usually we don't plug any brands, but in the blog article, I did notice that Bosch Technologies is one of the Azure partners, and they do a lot of healthcare and security device integration, like you were talking, and they are IoT enabled. They're Azure partner for IoT. So you can do things like you were talking about touching surfaces, and as we return to offices and we try to keep commerce and business working, this is one of those things. So you can use. The first thing in my mind was, we know that somebody's come through a door, but we also know in that hallway that there's, say, 2 or 3 touch points that there's no way to get around. They're not electronic. It's a manual door. So you can add those to a work order list automatically when somebody enters that area, and the staff will know that they have to attend and sanitize handles in that area, for example, right? So you can automate things like this, and it can help respond quickly for our new needs to keep things clean, like very, very clean. Yep. But also, I remember last fall, you and I were in Vancouver in a lovely Italian restaurant, if I'm not mistaken, because I have a problem with pasta and cold beer. My problem is I will just keep eating it and drinking it. but I remember we were talking about Azure Maps, and last fall, Azure Maps announced that they were going to start digging deeper into IoT for buildings, and that they were going to start this adventure for mapping internal buildings. And I remember last year being so excited about it, and then seeing their examples that they have in this blog post. I am absolutely impressed. I really loved it, because they went from announcing they're going to start the journey to now I should be able to go into an office and know what conference room and what meeting room is where in the floor plan.
Exactly.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
I can't tell you. I think we were working on a contract together last winter, and trying to find a meeting room in that office. It was like, where's Waldo?
It is, and especially for us,
when you don't know the floor plans, right? Like, it really is.
And the good thing is, even on the end of the contract, that was like 8 or 9 months after that, whatever it was at the end of the contract, we're still looking for the because we don't have memorized where is all the meeting rooms. Now imagine a person that is coming new to that, and you have that facility, right? That that way that you can easy demonstrate or where is that meeting room. That's true. That's true. Moving on, this is probably one of most exciting news that we see, and it's dear to our heart. The MDC, the Azure Module Data Center. Okay, and this is probably where we're gonna navigate through time and talk about geekness over here. So I apologize in advance, but Microsoft just extended now Azure, and they are really driving this to a different level. So Azure Module Data Center, or in this case the MDC, it's nothing more than a container, a 40-foot container, that is totally Azure, as you can see on the picture, that they have isolated. So it's been developed for a lot of things, a lot of scenarios, but it's built for mobile command. So if you have a humanitarian assistance, if you have a disaster, something like that, that you need that compute power. You need all the cloud that you don't have, because when those kind of types of disaster occurs, or when you need this, usually don't have. So I remember using this, or not using this, of course, because I never use it. It's new. This is a new from October 20th. But this is realized that it makes us way more mobile, because Azure is awesome. But there are a few scenarios that I've been seeing that leveraging cloud, it's not possible. I start using the Azure Stack at that time, but Azure Stack is still a rack. It's not fully proof, right? Especially on this type of things. And from what is on the news, this can be on even scenarios, not even scenarios, on even terrains. So it doesn't need to be completely like with the meter over there to just analyzing if it's level or not.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've been dealing with data center in a box for lots of years, like mobile data centers.
Yeah.
This is a whole new level, right?
Completely.
Because now, like you said, it doesn't have to be on the level, but this is a fully secured, completely enclosed. You plug in electrical, you plug in water. That's very traditional. And away you go. Now, there may be some changes with that. They didn't really release all the nitty gritty for that.
You don't need to plug it.
If this piques your interest, by all means, contact your Microsoft rep.
For sure.
Because they'll have more details than what we have in the news. But I loved the idea of this because, you talk about humanitarian response. And I think that that's really important. So let's say we go to a remote area or there's been a natural disaster, communications are down. Well, here comes the nerd, Marcos. Watch out. So tell me, my friend, what other new service from Azure can we integrate our modular data center box with? How do we connect it to the rest of the world?
That's true. So that's the part that I was saying is you don't need networking for this, because no, you don't. The connectivity is you have three ways that you can have it. You can have through full connected, like you put this as the picture shows over here, or on this picture as you can see if you are following us on YouTube, that you have all the connections available to this container or to this module. But you can also have satellite communication that usually it's not that reliable and it's not as fast, but you can have. But you don't need any connection at all. You just need to connect what you need to connect to this module, right? And it's fully out connectivity to the internet, and you have all the compute power over here. And I didn't see anything that they say that they need power, because I see here that they have this huge generator on the bottom. Or I'm assuming that is generator on the bottom, because they say that it's ready to go. As you can see here, this is in Redmond. Is one of the MC units coming out, right? And all of this is the power units. And then on top is the refrigerator. I'm assuming that is that. Again, I'm speculating here a little bit, or this is the part that I want to see. So basically, you can put these on a trailer, drive these to wherever you want to drive it. Of course, that this is a mobile unit, but the good thing is this can be placed. And one of the first thing that I was starting to see this being used is on mining. Mm-hmm. Because mining, it's very remotely. You have energy, okay? Usually you don't have too much connectivity, or you have a very slow, because it's really difficult to achieve to those mining sites. But if you put a container like this, and you have all the power to just control everything that you need to do it, you have the power of the cloud on that mining site, for example. And that, if you read the article, is one of the things that they say over here. So then you're starting to have the ultra low latency that you have close to that to data center to the cloud. And this is bring to other it opens to other things that now you're starting to see all of these modules of Azure around the world, especially when your connection is not that great. So if you are going outside of the big metropolis, that is where you have your low latency, when you have your pops of internet, and you can really leverage the low latency to the cloud, then you probably don't need this. But if you are to those smaller towns that you want to do it something, or you have the mining site, or you have a factory or something like that, that usually you are not in that metropolis area for cost purposes or other things, this could be a very good way that you can do it. And again, this is cloud. This reinforces what we've been telling a lot of times on our videos and our way to speak to the community, that the cloud is not going anywhere. And now we have cloud is not going anywhere, and now we have cloud everywhere.
Yeah, and one of the things I found so exciting about this, like yourself, was the ultra low latency. So imagine this is outside your building, outside your portable operations center for mineral exploration. So you're literally in a valley or on the side of a mountain somewhere with an Azure data center. Completely blows my mind that you can just have Azure in a box right beside you, like 1 or 2 milliseconds, whatever it is on your network there. And you can move it around with you as you have to move your operations. So that's very powerful, I think, for a lot of businesses out there. And the other thing that got me super, super geek excited about this was, imagine modular data center connected to Azure Space.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. It's just crazy. Blows my mind. It really blows my mind.
Now, you know what we're going to see? We're going to see one of these containers because that is not new that I think it was for 2 years. It was like before Ignite that we saw that. Right before Ignite, we saw that they had I think it was in Scotland, that Microsoft for 2 years, they had a data center that is almost the same size as this, underwater, and they were saying that they were 8 times with less, not disruption, but with less, what was the term? With less failures than a normal one. Now imagine this. So being Azure Space, we will see new things saying now we're going to have Azure on Azure. That Azure in Italian is or Azure is blue and basically in the cloud. So we'll have Azure computing on the space. And
exactly. I know, it's crazy. We're underwater. We're completely in the clouds. We're above the clouds. There's really it's interesting because, you and I talked years ago about how this is really a limitless cloud technology. Completely. So I talk a lot in my world about Microsoft Cloud. So M365, Azure, all of the things that kind of incorporate that whole suite and the life cycles. But this is really, truly limitless. We talked about it. It is limitless, but now, like, it's underwater. It's on the ground. It's in the cloud. It's now in space.
It's on your backyard. So my next house, guess what I'm going to have? I'm going to have, I want at least a 45-foot wide lot that I can put this on my backyard.
Marcos Nogueira with the mobile command center. All right. Well, I know where I'm going in the zombie apocalypse now.
At least we have low latency to just compute any kind of things that we might need.
Exactly. Well, it's really cool, right? So you think about those heavy compute requirements, doing geological calculations, requires a lot of compute power.
Yeah.
Remote operations, changing designs and things, a lot of CAD work, again, a lot of heavy compute power.
Yeah.
So this can actually reduce cost for businesses because, you and I both have talked a lot with people in mining and O&G operations over the years. And those satellite uplinks are really darn expensive, really
Oh my.
expensive. So if you can have all of your compute close at hand and you're not moving, terabytes of discovery and geodata back and forth, this can really reduce your costs significantly
Yeah.
because then you have a secondary uplink on the back end of that then replicates your data up. You've got disaster recovery for remote sites. That's massive.
It's
That kind
complete.
of stuff was just a dream not even a few years ago.
Even it's not that. Even something that, for example, the way that you want to doing migrations, you have these huge data centers that we are starting to see that they want to move to the cloud. So I don't know if that is possible. I'm just extrapolating here, but probably doing those migrations, you can leverage these as well. Because
Absolutely, yeah. They talked about it in their article a little bit that you can replicate apps and servers into your mobile data center,
yes,
and then use that as a means. So, kind of similar to the old black box method,
yeah,
load it and send it to Microsoft. This is just a much grander scale, right?
and
So,
it's online. So it's
yeah,
like the thing is you connecting this because the other service that we started to see, the black box, that is the Azure Data Box and everything else. Um, it's an offline one. There is a
it is.
period that that is more for data. It's not for applications. Okay,
That's exactly it. So
and
this gives us a
this
new way
a
to
new way,
move.
a new way to move. If you have this massive, we can disrupt less the service. We can disrupt less, and then probably it's going to be way more cost efficient and way everything efficient doing that way. So it's not only for those remote scenarios, humanitarian as well. So this is, like you said, it's limitless. It's just a way to see if it makes sense and you're doing everything.
Well,
But
I can't wait to see one in your backyard. I have to. I'm going to follow up on that in another year with you.
okay,
We'll
another
see what your
here.
wife has to say about that.
Probably another here is going to be difficult because I recently got this house. But give me a couple more years. You never know, right?
That's
Uh,
true. I have an empty spot in my garage. I'm just saying. Microsoft, come on.
okay, let's go to our final news. That is with our dear friend Mark Rusunovic, the CTO of Azure, that announced the partnership with Azure and Intel to commit to the next generation of confidential computing. So this is a project that is the third generation Intel Xeon platform, codenamed Ice Lake, that basically brings a different way to just have all of this confidential computing. So we know that we usually on Azure we are not accessing any type of hardware. Only a few exceptions now that they are on certain regions they are allowing to have access to the physical hardware. In this case, more for the VMware world, if you want to do that, or even if you want really have access to a really compute, but only a few cases. But this brings what we are seeing on this world, that is the trust and the confidentiality of your computing. And this is a good way because if you remember Ignite, and now it's going to be a shameless plug to our podcast about the Azure Book of News. In this case, the Ignite Book of News. Please visit that video as well. That me and Andrew were talking about all of that news that they released on Ignite. I think a month ago, something like that, a little bit over a month ago. And one of the things that they announced at that time, or they talk about, was the new way that Azure is being built for healthcare. And with healthcare, you have a lot of confidential information. And this is another way that Azure and Microsoft is preparing, and this announcement by Mark Russinovich saying that they are working with Ice Lake right now to just encrypt your full memory and accelerate your cryptographic performance. So basically, we are on the verge of almost the quantum computing. So everything that you put on this hardware is going to be automatically encrypted. It's going to be starting to having more hard time to those persons that want to do harm to us, harm to our information, and that makes the cloud even more secure, right? So
Exactly. Yeah. So this is a step in that direction, right? So Microsoft and Azure teams, specifically Azure teams, take that security and confidentiality very seriously. And also from a business perspective, Azure wants to get healthcare customers. And I've worked with two healthcare clients that utilize Azure, but they still do keep a hybrid model because they still want to keep their data local. They have a lot of apprehension and all of the legal beagles out there. I'm sure there's lots of arguments on both sides of that fence, and I'm not qualified to weigh in on that. But where we can talk about is the steps that Azure continues to take towards improving and monitoring security. So secure score, cost analysis score. We talked about well-architected framework today as well. So all of these things together, you combine this with the hardware layer with confidential computing, and you're starting to see a solution that's really designed with security in mind, and it's built to keep our data, yours and mine, secure. And for me, that makes a difference. I feel safe with my data in Azure, whether I'm doing business with a private healthcare company or a public healthcare entity. If they're using Azure in some capacity, I think that that's fantastic because it's going to help them reduce their costs and process that data faster, right?
and it's not only that, and we've been in a situation that we've been hit by a ransomware, and at that time I remember that we were working on moving that customer to the cloud faster, and we've been evangelizing them for about 9 months before that ransomware attacks, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, we spent they been stopped for over a week of completely shut down operations, over a week for us to recover that. And if they were on Azure, nothing happened because it's already protected. That's one of the things. The other thing that I see on this announcement as well by Mike Vorsunovich is the way that you are protecting edge to edge from the IoT device with the Intel and everything that you have available, the Intel SGX, that is the Intel software guard extensions that you can do it from IoT devices until you have all of that, until you're going Azure SQL, starting to grab that data and analyze that data. Now we're starting to have all of that confidentiality that is good for us because we have more devices than ever connected to the world. I have an automated system here at my house. I don't want anyone to know when I'm wake up, when I'm not wake up, when I turn the light, when I'm not, what TV I'm watching, what program. All of that, it should be privacy, right? And if we are not leveraging security regarding this, and if we don't trust, or we have a false sense of trust, because I don't have any problem because my computer is in front of me, I can see the blinking lights, so it's secure. My house is secure. It isn't, because if we want to break, we can break. And me, that comes from a different background. I'm original from Portugal. I did live in Brazil, so the security that we talking about, it's different. For example, so I remember one episode. There's nothing to do with this when I put my alarm system, not on this house, on my old house. When I hired alarm system, they put just alarm system on the windows on the basement and on the level of the on the ground level. But then I say, what about the upper level? Oh, here we don't have anyone that is going up. But I say, really? So it's so easy. You just put the ladder on top of my front garage, and you are on the roof. You just broke a window, and usually it's where we have all your good things. So usually the safe, it's on the closet or whatever it is. You have all the jewelry there, all of that value. I don't have anything like that, but usually I was thinking, wow. So if they come out of the second floor, they can basically rob the entire house, right? And you're doing. I remember going to Macau, for example, and usually the rich people live on the top floors of the buildings. And I remember looking up a very high building, and you see some kind of protection on the top five floors. And then I ask, why those guys have protection on top? Because here they have like the Spider-Man thieves that they're going outside of the building to rob them, because that is where they live, the multimillionaires.
That's
To
where
rob
all the
them,
good stuff is.
all the good stuff, and then they bringing out on the building and say, "Really? Wow,
That's crazy. Wow.
And that is just
I get worried when I'm on top of the garage. Yeah.
yeah, putting the Christmas light says no, that's not for me, so that's
enough
okay.
for me. I'm good. Yeah, I don't need roller coasters or I'm not Spider-Man, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Wow.
So
That's interesting, but we don't really deal with that kind of risk here in North America so much, and in Canada, definitely not. I know on my street, there's lots of people. There's many retired people as well here, and I think if somebody looked like they were looking in the windows, it would be short order, and there'd be a bunch of folks from the neighborhood outside probably in about 5 minutes or so. Certainly, if somebody was walking out my front window with my TV, they'd be asking some questions. But again, I think that's different culturally, right? So, here we'll ask about stuff like that in, Alberta for sure. We're very protective of property in Alberta, and maybe in some places you wouldn't ask those questions, right? You just, you know what, I don't want to be part of a problem. I'm gonna go downstairs and drink a tea or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
wow, yeah, it's interesting because we think of physical security as being very physical, and yet we replicate our data into the cloud. So just to tie it back together, confidentiality of that data is really critical.
it is.
And with the confidential computing announcement, specifically that before both our ADD skills took us down this path, we were excited about how customers in Azure will be able. I think it's going to be available next year. They said, early next year. Yeah. So maybe quarter one or quarter two, I would imagine. Takes them some time to roll out new hardware. First of all, they have to buy it and manufacture it.
Yeah.
But it's going to keep end-to-end encryption, like you said. But the memory is encrypted with this new Xeon third generation, the Ice Lake. So the memory is fully encrypted, and the data stays encrypted the entire time. So it's encrypted at rest. It's encrypted during transit, and now it's encrypted in memory and during processing.
Yeah.
So this is a huge improvement over at least what I've read about confidential computing in the past.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really exciting step for Azure. and definitely newsworthy. Another really good point. And I think that Azure continues to make these leaps and bounds. And Marcos, correct me if I'm wrong. This blog updates on a daily basis.
Yeah.
There's just so much going on. So many teams of people working on improving. Not only security, but all aspects, analysis, AI, the infrastructure, the apps that run on the infra, like everything. It's such a big ecosystem, and yet we still have this rapid change in practice. It's not just a mentality, it's actually a continuous improvement model. I'm sure there's an official term for it that's escaping me right now, but the rapid deployment of all of these changes, it's just amazing to me. And, it's part of what keeps me excited. It keeps me engaged because there's always something new. And I think that's really.
And that's one of the reasons for our podcast, our weekly podcast about Azure News, is to talk about this. I think we already cover way much that we anticipated, but I think our listeners already know that.
I was going to say, if we say it's 5 minutes,
it's going to be 45.
Get a coffee and sit down.
At least 45, but that's okay. I think it was a good conversation about all of that. Once again, Andrew, thank you so much for being available on our busy schedules. It's not easy to just reserve an hour to do this, or less than an hour in our schedules, but we squeeze this in. And see you next week in this case for another Azure Centric Azure Podcast News. Thank you once again for listening. If you are on our social media, don't forget to just give him a thumbs up and subscribe, so then you can see all the news coming on Azure World. Once again, thank you, good fellas, and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Marcos.
Yes.